As an accountant, a finance professional, and now a current serving CFO, one of the key skills that I've developed, honed, and learnt over time is the ability to explain finance figures, financial numbers to particularly non-financial people. And I make no exception here, it's actually quite a tricky skill to master. Not very, very easy at all. Don't forget, you've got complex financial information, data, numbers all over the place, basically, and you've got to try and sort of package this up and explain it in plain English or whichever language you're explaining it in to, like I said, particularly non-financial people. So if you are an accountant, finance professional, or even, somebody who just deals with numbers, what I'm going to do is in this video give you 5 useful pointers and tips as to how to explain financial numbers effectively. And number 1 is to consider your audience. Who are you presenting to? Now, I'm not talking about, a stand-up audience here or an audience you're standing up to. It could be an audience, obviously, who are receiving your report. That's the most common scenario, receiving a report for numbers or spreadsheets, whatever it is. Consider who is going to be reading this. If it's a regular, say, monthly, quarterly report, then perhaps, that the report is already fine-tuned. You know who your audience is, so you don't really need to do too much else, maybe a little further fine-tuning. But however, if these are new reports, new numbers, or, new information that needs to be presented perhaps to an audience that hasn't seen this stuff before, then, that has to be taken into consideration. How are you going to package these numbers? What kind of level of granularity are you going to go at? And also then how are you going to present it? What kind of format? So all these kind of things should be considered in light of your audience. Particularly if you're presenting information, financial information to higher level executives, the board, senior people, then you've really got to make sure that, number 1, obviously you've considered that. And then number 2, you lay out and present it in a way that is very digestible and absorbable to them. Because don't forget, they're time poor. They have a very, very limited amount of time, and they've got to be able to take this information, the key points, and be able to assimilate it, absorb it quickly in order to make decisions. They can't go through detailed reports. They've got to start from the top, which is a high level, and drill down into the detail if need be. However, like I said, it has to be concise and succinct to begin with. Number 2 is define with clarity exactly what you're presenting. Now, for this, I'm going to actually use an example which is popping up on screen now. And what you can see is a very, very simple P&L: revenue, cost of sales, expenses, and net profit or profits. And this is quite common in terms of presentation. Then you've got 3 other columns, which are really, 3 other columns at the moment. That's how I'm going to leave it. Now, just imagine if someone presented you with this particular table. Again, it depends on who you are, who's reading this. But the fact of the matter is, it's really, really not defined, I guess, and it hasn't got that level of clarity it needs. So firstly, as you can see, that the numbers are very, very hard to read. They're kind of like just hard numbers with decimal places. So it can be quite confusing. First thing you want to be doing is actually present the numbers in a readable format. Put a comma in there, and actually in a lot of instances you don't need decimal places unless of course it is crucial, in which this case in most reports it isn't. Remove that and you can automatically now see how much easier it is to read the 3 columns. Secondly is, well, where are all the labels? What do these columns represent? The first, second and third column. And now pop on screen you can see that the labels have come in: actuals, budget, and variance, which is actual versus budget. Next up is a time period. Well, what time period does this particular table or these numbers relate to? And again, on screen, you can see now we're defining this as January 2024. So very, very clear and simple label there will give context around the time period as to when it relates to. The next is currency. Well, it could be any currency. We can't just assume it's Great British pounds or US dollars or euros. Then label it very, very clearly what currency, and pop on screen. You can see here, this is actually a US dollar report. And last but not least, to some of us, it may be quite obvious that this is a profit or loss or income statement, but for others, it's not. So again, be very, very clear what is or what are the figures actually showing. And there you go. All you need is a headline there or a heading saying profit and loss for the period January 2024, or income statement if that's how you wish to label it. Number 3 is to articulate a simple overall message, like a bit of an executive summary. Now, it doesn't have to be long-winded or pages worth. Again, it really does depend on where you're working, what kind of report it is, who your audience are. But let's say we take a simple few lines here for the table that we just presented previously. And on screen, you can see quite clearly clearly here that I've articulated a high-level summary, very, very high level indeed, and it will take sort of the reader no more than probably 30 seconds to read, absorb, and actually get some very good context around that particular piece of financial information. Number 4 is to highlight any trends. Now, with the table that I presented, it's a bit difficult because it's just a standalone static month, but quite often with your reports, you'll have either monthly reports or year-to-date reports or reports against budget forecasts, etc. And therefore, you should be able to highlight key trends, certainly time trends or other kind of variance trends, which, you want to be highlighting, whether you highlight it with a highlighter as such, a digital one or a paper one, or whether you want to articulate that in some sort of qualitative analysis, that is commentary, just to say, okay, month to month, the run rate seems to be increasing for certain expenses due to these reasons. So trends are really, really important in terms of highlighting a story, if you like, from the numbers. And last but not least is obviously the use of visuals. Now, visuals are very, very powerful indeed. It's almost like the difference between reading a book and then watching the story on YouTube. The difference between me actually doing this video on YouTube for you to watch or actually writing it all down for you to read. Now, there's no right or wrong. People just have different preferences. And in my experience, certainly non-finance professionals, non-finance people always almost prefer to look at stuff visually with some supplementary, with numbers and text as supplementary information. So let's take a look at the earlier table that we did here. And as you can see, the table looks great, but if we were to convert that into a bar graph, then there you have it. You can see on screen, it probably is visually more appealing and therefore more digestible and absorbable and also understandable for a certain amount of people. As always, I hope this video adds value and is useful to you, and I will see you hopefully on another video.